So again, I welcome you to this month's episode of Wild Sarasota. We're going to be talking about eagles of Florida. And I am Dr. Catherine Clements. I'm the Ecology and Natural Resources Educator for the University of Florida IFAS Extension, Sarasota County. And I teach a variety of programs in wildlife, natural areas, plants, and conservation. I do programs for both adults and youth. Prior to COVID, I was doing environmental education field trips for our Sarasota school system. Those are called the LIFE program. It's an amazing program that we hope to get started again soon, and many other nature-based programs for all ages. I have a bachelor's degree in science, actually in environmental studies from the State University of New York at Buffalo. And I did a few years of environmental and outdoor education and then decided I wanted to become a physician. So I spent about 20 years training and then practicing as a physician. And about 4.5 years ago, I decided I wanted to come full circle and come back to environmental education. And I took my position here at University of Florida IFAS Extension. I've had many happy years living in Oscar Scherer State Park, which if you're not from this area, it is a state park in Sarasota County in Florida. It's a wonderful little place, and my husband is currently the park manager here. And so we've had the opportunity to live here and raise our children and a whole bunch of animals here over the last 20 plus years. So if you are not familiar with what UF IFAS extension is, well, UF is University of Florida. IFAS stands for Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, and extension are the offices throughout our state that are linked to the UF IFAS program. And the UF IFAS extension program is a partnership between the county we're in, the University of Florida, and the USDA. And so our job as extension personnel is to take the research and the information from the University of Florida and spread that to our community and use it to help with specific issues that are occurring within the county that we are in. So Sarasota County being a sort of a blend of an urban area and some agricultural area and a lot of natural area in this county. We have a lot of different programs that address all of those areas. As you can see on your screen, we do programs in agriculture, community development, gardening, a lot of different natural resources topics, nutrition, and of course we have a 4-H program that works with youth development as well. Here are some of the logos of many of our programs, so you may be familiar or might have even participated or volunteered for some of these programs. The Master Gardener program is a large program through the University of Florida, and we have a great group of Master Gardeners here in Sarasota County, might even have some on the call today. And then next to that Master Gardener logo is the Florida Master Naturalist program logo, and that is a program that is near and dear to my heart, and I teach a variety of the Master Naturalist courses here in Sarasota County. So let's move on and talk about Florida's eagles. So we have a little over an hour still together today, and this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about raptors as a group, and then we're going to focus more on eagles and what makes an eagle an eagle. And we're going to compare golden eagles versus bald eagles. Mostly here in the state of Florida, we have bald eagles, but along the northern part of our panhandle, we can have some golden eagle sightings as well. So we will do a little bit about golden eagles today, and then most of it will be about bald eagles. And we're going to talk about things like identification and natural history, which is all about how they live. We're going to talk about some of their adaptations. And then, of course, with our bald eagles, we're going to talk about historic conservation efforts and how they're doing, their population status. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about today. So let's talk a little bit more about raptors. So what is a raptor? It's a carnivorous bird or a bird of prey. These are some of the other terms that we use often synonymously with raptor. There are actually 482 raptors worldwide. So there's a lot of different types of birds of prey. And they tend to be characterized by 8 sharp talons, which you see a picture of the talons here on your screen. The top one is actually a replica of a bald eagle talon, and you can see the size compared to the pencil there. And then the one below it is a great horned owl talon. So our raptors will have 8 sharp talons, 4 on each feet. They have very strong feet because they're going to use those feet to grasp and hold on to their prey. And you can see a picture right here of that bald eagle's foot and those amazing talons. They have a hooked upper beak, which helps them to pull apart their prey. So they're mostly going to catch their prey with their feet, and then they're going to hold it with their feet and then use their beak to basically tear it apart and eat. So you can see this is a golden eagle in the middle picture here, and you can see that hooked sharp beak. You can see the sharp hooked beak of the bald eagle. And then I've put a couple other birds of prey in here. For instance, this great horned owl, as well as a vulture over here, all sharing modifications of that same type of beak. And they have very well developed eyes. So their eyes are going to take up a large percentage or portion of their skull. It just depends on the bird. It can be anywhere from 25 to 67% of their skull. Of course, our owls tend to have larger eyes because they are nocturnal. So they need larger eyes and able to let in order to let in more light throughout those evening hours. But still, if you look at this bald eagle, or sorry, this golden eagle in the middle, its eye is quite large compared to the size of its skull. They can see 8 to 10 times better than humans, and they actually have 3 eyelids. So they have a special type of eyelid called a nictitating membrane. I love that word. It's a very fun word to say. And nictitating membranes are common in a variety of different animals. Alligators have them, for instance, as well. And what those nictitating membranes do is they actually help to keep the eye clean, keep it protected. And so they will have a set of eyelids that are for blinking. They'll have a set of eyelids that are for sleeping, and then they'll have this nictitating membrane, which is more for maintenance. And then raptors have a really important ecosystem value. As predators, they help maintain an ecosystem balance by eating some of the animals that we really wouldn't want to just be overabundant in our ecosystem. So if you think about what some of these raptors eat, for instance, owls eat a lot of rats and mice and moles and shrews, a lot of different rodents. And rodents play a very important part in our ecosystem as well, but we want them to be in balance. We don't want to be overrun with those type of animals. You know, and even some of our eagles will eat fish or they'll eat rabbits. And as much as we love fish and rabbits, we don't want to have an overpopulation of any one thing. So all of our predators just help maintain that ecosystem balance for us. And eagles are also, or all raptors are also an indicator of environmental health. Being predators, they eat many smaller things than them, and whatever is those smaller animals are being exposed to can do what we call biomagnification. So if those smaller animals are being exposed to some type of toxin or pollution, then as an eagle or an owl eats hundreds of different other animals throughout its lifetime, then what's in those animals' bodies actually basically sort of condense in the bodies of those predators. And if there is something that is an environmental health problem, we're going to see it show up in some of those predators, unfortunately. And we're going to talk about at least 2 specific examples of that today. So before we go into details on eagles, here is just a wide variety of the different types of raptors that we have here in Florida. And of course, we have even more throughout our entire country, but I thought I would focus on Florida for today. And so as we know, we have bald eagles in our state, as well as I mentioned some golden eagles just in the very northern edge of the panhandle, sort of the northwest of the panhandle. We have a variety of different falcons. We have hawks, probably in Sarasota County, our red-shouldered hawk is going to be the most common. We have kites. Right now we're seeing the swallowtail kites as they travel through. They're very beautiful. They're the white birds with a little black on them that have the split tail. We have lots of osprey here in Florida, a variety of owls, and that's what I'll be talking about next month. And of course, we have vultures like turkey vultures and black vultures. On your screen here, the top picture is the Audubon's crested caracara, which we have mostly in the eastern part of Sarasota County. This is, I believe, a red-shouldered hawk. And then the bottom picture is an osprey. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about eagles. This is a beautiful pair of bald eagles that were in the pine tree right above my driveway. So one day my daughter was outside, it was in December. She was outside on our deck and she came in and got us because this is a male and female eagle that were flying overhead and getting to know each other and doing all sorts of swooping maneuvers, and then they landed in the pine tree right over our driveway in our house, and I was able to get a pretty nice picture of the two of them there. So it's really lovely when we get to see these eagles flying overhead or perhaps even close up in a tree above us. So what makes an eagle an eagle? They are in the order of falconiforms or accipitriforms. That's a big word. And this order basically are the diurnal birds of prey. So these are the birds of prey that are awake and active during the day mostly, and they are in the family Accipitridae. And generally this is birds of prey that are stronger than the buteos, which are the hawks. And there are 60 species that are classified into sort of these different types of groups. And of course, our bald eagle is more the fish or sea eagle. And their key characteristics of eagles are that they're going to have a fully feathered head, and sometimes they have really fun feathers like this eagle that you see here, which is, I believe that's a harpy eagle. Yes. So we don't have those here in Florida, but it's just such a cool picture. I wanted to share it with you. So eagles will have fully feathered heads. They have a heavier, or maybe you'd say stronger or more robust beak than most other raptors, which you can see on that bald eagle picture on the bottom. They subsist largely on live prey, so they will eat carrion, which is dead things. Like if they're really desperate and really hungry, or I guess if it looks really good, maybe they'd eat carrion. But our eagles in general are going to prefer live prey. Their vision, as we mentioned, for all raptors is very good, but for eagles, their eyes tend to be angled at about 30 degrees out, which gives them some decent vision where they can tell their depth perception really well, but it also gives them some decent peripheral vision as well by having that angle. And they can perceive 5 basic colors. They are monogamous and they will often reuse their nest sites. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's true of most eagles. And for most eagles, young mature pretty slowly. And we'll talk about specifics with our bald eagles in a moment. So let's talk a little bit about golden eagles. So how you would identify a golden eagle is they are very dark brown, as you see here, with the feathers on the back of their necks or heads tend to have a golden sheen to them. And sometimes even when the light hits those feathers, it almost is like sparkly gold. Their back tail feathers are long and project further out from their body than their head does. And a main identifying feature, especially for comparing golden eagles to bald eagles, are that golden eagles have feathers all the way down to their toes. So they're one of our few feathered birds or feathered eagles. Their habitat and range is partially or completely open country around mountains and hills. So they're gonna like more elevated areas, very open areas, and they tend to be concentrated in the western half of the US, but they can be found in the eastern part of the country as well. Like we said, they are even in that western part of our panhandle, but they are more prolific in the western half of our country. And I skipped over the length and wingspan, but you see that there. So they have about a 6 to 7 foot wingspan. They are very close in size to bald eagles, so there really isn't a big size differential. They might be a little smaller, but it's just going to depend on the individual. And some fun facts about golden eagles. They are the most common official national animal. So I put a few of the places where they're a national animal down there. They are fast and nimble, and they can maneuver really well in flight, which isn't always true of some of the bigger birds. And the oldest golden eagle that we are aware of was 31 years of age. So last time I gave this presentation, there were a lot of questions on how you would tell a juvenile or immature golden eagle and bald eagle apart from each other. Because of course the adult bald eagles have that beautiful white head and white tail that we're so familiar with, but immature bald eagles will have a lot of modeling on their bodies where they'll be, their head and their tail will not be fully white yet, or maybe not white at all when they're really young. Their bodies will be brown, but will have lots of white specks on them. And golden eagles have some similar plumage in their younger years. So I thought I'd share a few facts and some pictures about how to tell the younger birds apart. And to be really precise, if we want to use our language really precisely, a juvenile bird is one in its first plumage. So it's already fledged, meaning it's left the nest, but it has its first set of feathers. Whereas an immature, when we're talking about eagles, an immature bird is going to have like perhaps 2, 3, or 4 more changes of its plumage before it gets its full adult feathers. It usually gets its full adult feathers in like that 5th change or molt. And usually that's about 5 years after it's born. So juveniles are that first year about, give or take, and immatures are going to be more about 1 to 4 years old, and then the adults are going to be about 5 years old. So let's talk about how you can tell some of these younger golden eagles apart from the younger bald eagles. It's not always easy. You can think about the picture that's on your screen and try to guess while I talk you through these differences. So with the golden eagles, of course, if you could see their legs, even the young golden eagle's legs are going to be covered almost entirely in feathers. So if you look at this picture, you really can't see their legs. So it's really hard to tell. And in most cases, if you were to see them out in nature, you would not be able to see their legs very well. Also, golden eagles, even when they're young, tend to have smaller heads with those golden brown feathers on the back of their heads. In flight, and this is really one of the better ways to tell them apart, and I'm going to show you a few pictures in a minute. In flight, golden eagles are going to have solid brown inner wings with some white, like a larger white patch somewhere on the underside of their wing. And where that white patch is and how big it is differs from individual to individual. Eyes of the golden eagles stay dark brown. So the golden eagles are going to have that dark sort of chocolatey brown eye color. Their tail feathers are going to be white at the base of the feathers with a dark terminal band on the end of the tail feathers. And I have a really great picture to show you of that in a minute. And once again, think about where they like to live. Our golden eagles, not so likely that we're going to see them here in most of Florida. And they're going to be more likely in the open and mountainous areas and more likely out west, but not just out west. Okay, so Immature bald eagles, they're going to have bare lower legs. When they are flying, you're going to see a lot of modeling, like I mentioned, on both their breast and the underside of their wings. So their whole chest, depending on which molt they are in, their whole chest is going to be all sort of spotted brown and white, and the same with underneath of their wings. They are going to have dark brown eyes that start to lighten after their first year, and their eyes will eventually turn sort of a very light brownish color or almost like a yellowish color. The beak is heavier and longer, but it's not as easy. If you don't have a golden eagle next to a bald eagle, it's hard to compare and say that. So if you're just seeing them up in a tree somewhere or through your binoculars far away, that's not really going to help you either. I want to talk about, there are a couple features of the beak. The cere is the area sort of right around where that nasal hole is right there. The cere is not in bald eagles as noticeably different from the rest of the beak. And in golden eagles, I'm going to go back a picture, maybe two. Nope, sorry about that. In golden eagles, especially, this one's an adult, but see how the area around that nostril hole is yellow and the rest of the beak is dark. So that is the cere. And then this part that you almost might say is like the lips is called the gape. And on golden eagles, even when they're young, this is quite pronounced and quite yellow as well. Whereas in bald eagles, it's not quite so different from the rest of the beak. And back to bald eagles, their head stays brown for only about 6 to 12 months, and then it'll start getting mottled. It'll start getting those white spots until it's fully white at maturity in about 5 years. And then of course, our immature bald eagles are going to be found near the water. All right, so I gave you lots of details. Let's see what you think this bird is that you see on your screen. Do you think this is an immature or young golden eagle, or an immature young bald eagle? Go ahead and type into your chat whether or not you think it's a bald eagle or a golden eagle. I see lots of different guesses. So first I saw a bunch of bald eagles, then I saw a bunch of golden eagles. Now I'm seeing back and forth. And then somebody said, I came late, so I don't know. Well, I would agree that a lot of people don't know. This one's really hard. My assistant actually had it as a golden eagle, but I want to guess that it's a bald eagle, and I'll tell you why. And honestly, I'm not even sure, because we pulled this off the internet, and you know how the internet is. You can't trust what somebody might have identified it as on the internet either. So I'm guessing it's an immature bald eagle, because see how light the eyes are? And with our golden eagles, their eyes are going to stay pretty dark. I'm going to take us back to our golden eagle. So that is a golden eagle. Their eye is a bit darker. And then see our bald eagle, its eye is quite light, almost yellow. So I'm almost thinking that means bald eagle. I'm also looking at the beak and thinking that I don't see a huge difference between what I talked about with the cere and the gape. It is yellow here, but it's not contrasted against a darker beak. And then I'm seeing a lot of modeling as well. And so I think this is an immature bald eagle, but it is really hard to tell, folks. Luckily, if you're in Florida, most likely 99.9% of the time you are seeing a bald eagle, and so you don't have to get this good at knowing the difference. All right, so who is this? Golden or bald? Anybody want to guess in the chat? I got some. Yeah, now I've got a lot of goldens coming in, and you are correct. So this is an adult. And once they get into their adult plumage, it's obviously much easier to tell. Look at sort of that gold, that beautiful gold sort of coloration to those brown feathers. Here's the gape that is quite yellow. And in the adults, the cere starts to be a little bit less yellow, but definitely a dark beak, whereas an adult bald eagle is going to have a fully yellow beak at that point. There is a great, I don't think, yeah, I can't put this in the chat box for you right now, but this is a great website I found on how to tell a juvenile golden eagle from a juvenile bald eagle. It's got lots of pictures that were copyrighted, so I couldn't share them in this presentation. But if you want to go to avianreport.com, you'll be able to look at that a little bit closer if you want a little bit more practice with that. All right, golden or bald eagle? Anybody want to guess in the chat? All right, here they come. Excellent. A few more goldens and you would be correct. So again, we're seeing some of those brownish gold feathers coming from the back of the head. We're seeing dark eyes. We're seeing the yellow of the cere and the gape, but the end of the beak being quite dark. And then this is what I meant about the tail, where you can see the base of the tail is going to be white with that terminal dark band at the end. So a bald eagle's tail is never going to look like that. It's going to start out all sort of brown, then it's going to be mottled brown and white, and then it's going to turn white. Here also, you can clearly see, this is such a great picture, you can clearly see the feathered legs of the golden eagle as well. So great picture to aid in identification. And then here are some range maps from All About Birds, which is a great website from Cornell University. If you haven't been on that website, it is the place to go to learn more about birds. They have great identification and pictures and natural history. And then they have these range maps. And so you can see where these birds are likely to be. And so sort of your reddish orangey color, that's the breeding population or the breeding range, sorry. So that's where they're more likely to be during the summer months. The blue is where they're more likely to be during the winter months. The yellow is where you're going to see them moving through from their summer to winter areas. And then purple is the year-round population. So our left-hand side map here, this is the bald eagle. And so you can see that we have a resident population of bald eagles. They stay here year-round in Florida. And then on the right-hand side is your golden eagle. So you see they aren't really here much at all, except occasionally you might see one moving through in the panhandle of our state. But you're definitely going to see golden eagles out in the west, as well as bald eagles out there too. All right, I'm gonna see if I can make this work for you guys. What I wanted to do is show you a couple pictures that are perhaps easily confused. If you were to see this bird flying overhead, you might think it's a bald eagle, but it is not. Who knows what bird this is? I'm sure a lot of you know. We have a lot of these here in Sarasota. Look at the chat box. Of course, osprey. So ospreys are sometimes commonly called like fish eagles or sea eagles because they are related and they are birds of prey and they do eat some of the same food that eagles eat. So sometimes they're confused, but when you see a really good picture of one, you see how much white is on the body of the osprey compared to either the eagles we just talked about. So if you're seeing a bird that in flight has a lot of white on their chest and on the undersides of their wings, also identifying feature is sort of this dark band through its eye right there. This is going to be your osprey. Here's another picture of one. Hold on. Okay, so there's one sitting in some palm fronds, and you can see, yes, they have those brown wings, but they definitely have that white chest and that brown band through the eye. All right, I also want to see if I can play for you their call. We're going to see how this works. I can't promise it'll work. Try my best. Okay, here is the call of the Osprey. Okay, could you guys hear that okay? Somebody give me a yes or no in the chat box. Okay, great, because we're going to listen to a couple others. So here is an immature bald eagle. So this is a young bald eagle, probably right in its last plumage before it gets its final adult plumage, because you can see it's got almost a fully yellow head or fully white head. Its tail is still a little brownish, but almost fully white. And then it still has some mottling in its flight feathers as well, but really getting very close to its adult plumage. Let me play for you a bald eagle call. So that's our bald eagle. And then, this is also a bald eagle. The picture is not as great because I took it, but this is a bald eagle in flight near an active nest just a couple weeks ago at, or actually almost a month ago now in March at South Venice Lemon Bay Preserve. We did a walk there to go walk out to their eagle nest, and we actually were able to see both adults and both fledglings that were just learning how to fly back in March from that nest. So once again, this is an adult, so you see no mottling anymore on the body of the eagle or on the wings. You see the fully white head. You can even in my poor picture, you can see the yellow beak. And then the tail, interestingly, does look like it has a bunch of brown on it. And I honestly think that its tail is dirty, because this is a fully grown adult whose tail should be completely white. So I think we're seeing partially its feet, and then partially also its tail is probably just dirty from being up in the nest with a bunch of babies. All right, and then let me play for you. I do not have a good picture of a golden eagle in flight, but I do want to play for you their call. So to me, the golden eagle almost sounds like it's got a little whoop to it, like it's whooping, whereas our bald eagle, I'll play that again. So differences in their vocalizations as well. All right, so now we're going to launch into more specifics about our bald eagles. So they, of course, were adopted as our national symbol. They became our national symbol in 1782. And their name, or their common name, comes from the old term piebald, meaning white. And of course, they have those white heads and tails with chocolate brown bodies and wings, and the bright yellow beak and feet. Female eagles, as with most of our raptors, are going to be larger than our males. In fact, with our raptors, our females can be up to about 25% bigger than the males. And with our bald eagles, females will have about an 8-foot wingspan, and they will be about 10 to 15 pounds. Males will have about a 6-foot wingspan, be about 5 to 10 pounds. So maybe if you saw a female and a male sitting right next to each other at their nest, and you could guess that they were a breeding pair, so one would be female and one would be male, you might be able to tell which one's bigger. But in general, you're not really going to be able to tell, because there's going to be some overlap in sizes. There's about 250,000 breeding populations throughout our world of bald eagles, and they have been a success story under the Endangered Species Act. They were listed as endangered in 1978, and they were actually removed from the list in 2007 because their population had rebounded so well. And if we don't run out of time, we're going to talk about some of those details. So let's talk a little bit about habitat and home range. So we already mentioned they really like to be near large bodies of water because of course their primary food source is fish. So they also like to be in forested areas. They tend to like to not only perch on large trees like we see in this picture here, but we're also going to see that that's where they often like to make their nests. They do not like to be around people. So unlike ospreys who are willing to build their nests on telephone poles right by the side of the road or electric poles, bald eagles are not going to choose to do that. They're going to choose to be further removed, and they're going to need a larger area because of that in order to exist. They are throughout the United States and Canada, and then dip a little into northern Mexico. And as we mentioned, of course, they're year-round residents here in Florida. They are very competent flyers, but if you ever see them walking on the ground, they're not really made for that. So they walk a little weird. They look a little bit more like penguins when they're walking on the ground. And they are capable of a type of swimming. And one of my favorite memories of seeing a bald eagle was out in Seattle on the Olympic Peninsula. I was out there a couple years ago in a house on a lake, and there were two eagles, probably a mated pair, that would fly around the lake hunting for fish every morning and evening. And I heard one calling and calling and calling. So I went and looked out the window, and in just enough time to see it swoop down and try to grab a fish from someone who was fishing in the lake. And then it would not lift off of the water. And so I watched it for a while thinking something was wrong with it, but actually what it was doing was this type of swimming that they can do, which when they grab a fish that's too heavy to lift out of the water, either the fish is too big or the eagle's feathers have gotten a little too wet and they can't lift out of the water, they will flap their wings and actually sort of swim to the side of wherever they're at, so they're able to get up on the ground, dry off a little bit, stop that fish from wriggling around so much, and then they will hopefully be able to lift off and carry their fish back to a perch or to their nest. So it's really amazing if you get to see it. It's very strange looking. They will occasionally hunt cooperatively, although they are pretty individual, except when they're with their mate. They will harass other birds for food and try to take somebody else's food. And they will be found in large numbers, most often during wintering times and when food is a little scarce. If they find a place where there's a good source of fish, then they might be found in larger numbers together. I've seen in British Columbia, and I've heard that people have seen this in Alaska too. In British Columbia near Vancouver, down by the water, there'll be like some muddy beach area on the coast, and I have seen like 50 to 100 bald eagles all together in one area, which is really cool. They do like to play, so they can have fun together. And although they mostly want fish, they will eat birds and reptiles and smaller mammals, and they'll even eat some crustaceans. They're capable of gorging and fasting, so they may eat a really big meal and then they can fast for upwards of a week. So when they breed, they do mate as monogamous pairs, and so they will stay together as a pair unless their mate dies, and then they will find another mate. They will do sort of a mating breeding dance where they will lock their talons in midair and they will plummet, and then they will break apart from each other just before hitting the ground, which I think is what we were seeing in those two bald eagles that were over my house that day. It was really amazing. They do go back to their nests. And they will sort of fix them up and renovate them a little bit, rebuild them if necessary, year after year, And so the nest will sometimes grow in size and weight from year to year. And sometimes they just choose to build a different nest, sometimes not even that far away from the nest that they had been using for many years. Also here in Florida, we often have high wind events. So sometimes, although the nests are pretty heavy and sturdy, sometimes they are blown out or destroyed by some of these wind events. And then the eagles will often come back to that same area and just start building their nest over again the following year. They have one of the largest nests of almost all birds. And there was a nest up in St. Petersburg that was about 9 feet by 18 feet or 3 meters by 6 meters, which is really large. And they can weigh upwards of a ton if they've been built on year after year after year. Eagles will have 1 to 3 eggs. It's pretty common to have 2 eggs. A lot of that just depends on how mature the eagles are and how good they are at mating and also how healthy they are. So most eagles will have 2 eggs, but they could have 1 or 3. And in this top picture here, you see a little tiny fuzzy eaglet on the edge of the nest there. The eggs will be incubated by both the males and females. They'll take turns taking care of the eggs and hunting to feed themselves. And that lasts for about a little over a month. And then the eaglets will stay in the nest for anywhere from about 56 to 98 days. So about 2 to 3-ish months. And then, of course, they will start to fledge or start to learn how to fly. They'll still stay around the nest usually for a couple weeks before flying off and sort of finding their own space. And immature bald eagles will spend about 4 years exploring because, of course, they're not going to become sexually mature until about 5 years old, where that's when they're going to find a mate and try to settle down a little bit. And here's that pair again that was over my house. So survival of bald eagles, it's only about 50% in the first year, mostly due to inexperience. So they're just, like any young, they're trying to figure their way around life. And sometimes they make bad choices, and out in nature for wild animals, that can unfortunately be fatal. If they make it through their first year of life, only about 10% of eagles each year die from whatever is happening out there in the wild. They can survive approximately 30 years in the wild, and the longest known wild eagle was 39 years of age. In captivity, though, where they are taken care of and provided with what they need, they have been documented to survive upwards of 50 years. So they're pretty long-lived for a bird. So here's a little history about our bald eagles. Of course, I already mentioned in 1782, this is when they were adopted as our national symbol. And it was estimated at that time that there were about 100,000 nesting eagles. When we get into the mid to late 1800s, we start having more loss of nesting habitat and decline of waterfowl, shorebirds, and other prey that the eagles would be eating. And so, of course, if your prey is not as prolific, then your population is probably going to decline. And in the mid to late 1800s, this is also when eagles were sometimes considered marauders, that they were thought to prey upon valuable livestock, and so they often were hunted and shot because they were perceived as a threat. So in 1940, prior to the Endangered Species Act, we had the Bald Eagle Protection Act, and this prohibited the killing, selling, or possessing of bald eagles or any parts of them, like their feathers. In 1962, there was an amendment added to include the golden eagle, and it was then called the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. And by 1963, we had only 487 nesting pairs of bald eagles left. And once again, this was because of the habitat loss and the hunting that we mentioned previously, but there was also something else that was impacting the story, called DDT. So DDT is dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane, big long word for a chemical that in the 1940s was really our first modern synthetic insecticide or pesticide. So in the 1940s, it was incredibly useful, not only for agricultural pests, but also for disease prevention from mosquitoes and other insects that spread disease like malaria, for instance. So it was actually, you know, touted almost as a savior in many ways, especially in some of our military situations where people were living in close contact and they were often in sort of tropical areas where these insects were spreading disease. But in the 1950s, we started to establish a link between the spraying of DDT to control beetle populations and a reduction in the robin population in the state of Michigan. So we started to see, oh, wait a second, something's going on that maybe this isn't such an amazing, you know, miraculous story with DDT. And then as we were starting to become more aware and study the situation, realizing that DDT was washed into waterways where aquatic plants and fish were absorbing it. And then of course the predators were eating those fish or ducks that were eating the aquatic plants. And this is where we have the story of biomagnification, where as DDT was being absorbed into the plants and then animals and fish were eating those plants, then the DDT got into the bodies of those animals and fish. And then of course, something like an eagle has to eat lots and lots and lots of fish. And so we see a magnification up the food chain. We also realized that DDT was what we call an endocrine disruptor, and it was also impacting the calcium metabolism of the eagle, which then impacted the eggshell strength and viability. And so for a number of years, what we then saw happen was that as eagles were sitting on their eggs in their nests, the eggshells were just cracking and breaking, and we weren't seeing new eagles being born to repopulate the overall eagle population. There was also additional bald eagle deaths due to lead poisoning. This is another situation of biomagnification where eagles were eating waterfowl that had accumulated lead shot in their bodies. And so there was lead in the bodies of the things the eagles were eating, which of course then impacted eagle survival as well. And in 1962, all of this sort of came to a head with a book written by Rachel Carson called The Silent Spring. And this led to the bans in the United States of DDT that started in the late 60s and were supposed to culminate in about 1972 to decrease the use of DDT and the harm it was having on the environment and the animals. DDT is still currently being used. It's mostly being used because it is such a great pesticide or insecticide. And I will let you do a little research of your own to find out more of that information if you're interested. So here are some of our conservation efforts. So in 1967, this is when it was listed under the Endangered Species Preservation Act. Sorry, this is, and then in 1973, they were listed as endangered, which is sort of the highest classification. And at this point in the Endangered Species Act in all the continental states, aside from those ones listed on your screen. So they were doing better in Michigan, Minnesota, Oregon, Washington, and Wisconsin, but their population was really declining everywhere else in our country. But in July 1995, our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service announced that populations had rebounded to the threatened level. Threatened is one category below endangered. So we were really seeing the population of the bald eagles come back. In 2006, it was estimated that there were almost 10,000 nesting pairs of bald eagles, and Florida was home to 166 of those. So really starting to see some rebound. If you just Google return to flight, you will be able to find it and watch the whole, I think it's like 15 minutes long or so. So that video is really an amazing video of conservation and a successful conservation effort in the Channel Islands out west, which if you watch the beginning of the video, they talk about how those islands were so contaminated with DDT, for instance, that they weren't sure that the eagles were going to be able to survive there and that they were going to be able to successfully and healthfully bring the eagle population back. And they were, and it's just really fascinating how they went about it. So I will highly suggest that you get a chance to watch that video. It's just fabulous. So here are some of our ongoing threats to the eagle populations. Certainly loss of habitat for most of our wildlife, especially deforestation of some of our larger old growth virgin forest, which started in the 1850s. This is a main habitat for many of our bald eagles. And then destruction of shoreline nesting, perching, roosting, and foraging habitats due to development, because of course we really all like to be near the water, and unfortunately the eagles don't really like to be near us when we're near the water. Vehicle collisions are also a leading direct cause of death. I can't even imagine hitting an eagle with a car because they're pretty big birds and certainly unfortunate, but it does happen. They also can be electrocuted from forming an accidental circuit if they land on the power pole or on the wires. If their feet or wings touch different parts, then they're gonna get electrocuted, although we have a number of construction standards in place to try to minimize this from happening. Lead poisoning is still an issue. And then oil spills, of course, if any of you remember hearing about the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill, that happened in Alaska, and it ended up killing 247 bald eagles. And then there's this other interesting thing that's currently being studied called avian vacuolar myelinopathy. So this is a disease that is affecting the white matter of the brains of eagles, as well as some other birds and even some mammals and other types of vertebrates. And we're not really sure why it's happening, but what's being studied right now is the link between eagles eating some birds like American coots that have eaten hydrilla that are harboring, and hydrilla here in Florida is an invasive species, and that hydrilla is harboring a cyanobacteria that we think is linked to carrying a neurotoxin that is affecting the brains of these birds. So of course, in our environment, it's a very complex system, and if you affect one thing, you often affect many other things. So this is a case where we're trying to understand the links between this invasive plant called hydrilla, the cyanobacteria that grows with it, and how that might be causing this brain disease in eagles. Oh, sorry. And then here are some more contemporary efforts for protection. The eagles are protected under a variety of federal and state laws. There is a current population in the United States of about 143,000 bald eagles, which is about half the global population of golden eagles. And what's interesting to me about bald eagle population is about half of the bald eagles are actually in Alaska. So about 72% or 72,000 are in Alaska. The remaining 70,000 are outside of Alaska, and only about 12,000 are in the southeast region. Globally, golden eagles have a population of about 300,000, with about 39,000 in the US and only 5,000 of them in the eastern states. So I really invite you to go out and do some eagle watching. It's a great way to learn more about these birds and develop a bond with our wonderful eagles. But there is some eagle watching etiquette. So your recommended viewing distance is to stay a minimum of 330 feet away from the eagles. You do not want to disrupt them. You certainly don't want to disrupt their nesting and breeding, which is going to allow them to have more future eagles. So bring your binoculars or a telephoto lens for your camera or a birding scope, and stay that 330 feet away at least. In a lot of our natural areas, In Sarasota County, the state and county parks will actually rope off the trail so that you're not allowed to get close, but they don't always rope off every trail. So please use your best judgment and honor that space. Actually, if you're doing anything more than what would be sort of normal activity, you're supposed to stay 660 feet away. So anything that is excessively loud, like using machinery, we would actually stay even further away. You don't want to yell at them. You don't want to do anything to try to get their attention or to try to get them to move or fly. You don't want to take your dogs or other pets near their nests. And if the eagle pays attention to you, that generally means that you are a little too close or a little too noisy or disturbing the eagle, and you should back off and be a little quieter. So please just give them the space they deserve and educate others that are with you to do the same. You can report previously undocumented bald eagle nests to FWC, which is our Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. They do want to know where bald eagles are located throughout the state. So you can do that online at baldeagle@myfwc.com. If you think that you have seen someone violate bald eagle rules, or you find a dead or injured bald eagle, you can call the FWC Wildlife Alert Hotline or a local wildlife rehabilitator. So where can you go to see eagles? So on the FWC website, there is this historically active eagles nest. They don't tell you where the current ones are because they don't want a million people flooding to them. But you can see, this is basically Sarasota County. You can see the different places where bald eagles have nested in the past and often are still currently nesting. There is also a live eagle cam from an undisclosed place in eastern Sarasota County. So if you just Google live eagle cam Sarasota County, you can see if anybody's in the nest. It's a little past nesting time right now. Most of the young eagles here in Florida have already fledged and are out of the nest, but you never know what you might see or who might be coming back to the nest. So Oscar Scheer State Park, which is in Sarasota County, has generally, we often have about 3 active nests. This is one of them that's out back behind where we actually live in the park. This is from April of 2020, so that was last year's nesting season. And this nest, it was revisited and was active again this year. Here's an eagle from that nest last year. This is one of the adults sort of landing on a snag that was near the nest site at sunset. This is the eagles from South Venice Lemon Bay Preserve. This was the pair that we saw just about 2 weeks ago. And actually, this is not a pair. This is an adult bald eagle. And then here is the juvenile. Still in the nest, about ready. They were fledging, they were learning to fly. And while we were out there photographing them and watching them, we saw both of the adults and both of the juveniles either around the nest or flying overhead. So that was really great. So this nest had 2 eagles that survived this year. This is a nest that we just saw about, well, this one was about 2 weeks ago, I think, South Venice Lemon Bay. That was in March. And then this is at Sheer Thaxton Preserve, which is sort of on the northeastern edge of Oscar Scheer State Park. And this is a different nest that was active. And we were out there for a walk a couple days after this photo was taken and saw one of the adults hanging around and actually sitting in this dead tree behind the nest. So there are a number of eagles nesting and breeding here in Sarasota County. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. There is my email. If there is anything you need, please feel free to reach out to me. All right, everyone, thanks a lot. We will see you again.